Fame, if you win it, comes and goes in a minute. Where's the real stuff in life to cling to long?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Boomer Pod podcast, where we interview movie and TV celebrities. Our guest today is producer, writer, and director Mitch Teemley. Welcome, Mitch.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today on the Boomer Pod.
My pleasure.
What other career paths did you try before getting into film, Mitch?
I've been one of those when I was in high school and I took what they call it, the PSAT, the preparatory one. And then they met with you afterward to say, you look like you would be best suited to pursue a career. And I was told anything but math, any of the arts. Basically, I was just like wired to be creative. So yeah, I also write music. I've written music for my films, and I even danced briefly, but we won't go into that. And the visual aspect has always been there. When I was young, I thought I wanted to be an artist, but I ultimately ended up just really enjoying the visual composition of films and stage productions. I've done some stage directing too, so that kind of all the arts came together ultimately, really for me, just it's a real package deal to put together a film. I can conceptualize it visually, I can do music for it. As a director, I've got the movie in my head, and so I know what it is I need the pieces for to put it all together.
Okay, let's talk about your career in producing, directing, and writing. How do these different roles come to you?
There's an interlocking kind of an aspect to it. I have, of course, directed other people's material, but I enjoy directing my own material because when I write, a lot of screenwriters don't direct, although a lot of do get into it at one point or another. And the same thing is true of stage work. Even when I did my graduate work in theater, but unlike any of the other graduate film directing students at UC Irvine, I wrote the plays that I directed. I had to get a special okay from the admin because really I knew from early on that I wanted to be the guy who interpreted and staged the piece that I did. But I also knew from early on that I was really drawn to film. There was a moment when I saw a play production, and it ended with a bunch of townspeople whose souls had been bought by a rich man who'd given up their sense of integrity for material wealth. And I remember seeing the opening scene, the closing scene in the play, and all the cast had these lavish costumes, and there was a gleaming city in the background that had been built for them, all at the cost of their own integrity. And I wanted to zoom in. I wanted to move in on a close up and look through their eyes and see the city through their eyes. See, there's nothing left in them. Their souls are gone. And that was the moment when I thought, I want to do this, but I really want to control even further than you do on stage what the audience sees, exactly what they experience.
And how about producing?
Producing is a practical kind of an expedient. I'm not, although I have what they call line produced, which is putting all the pieces together, assembling the crew and scheduling the film shoot and all that. Primarily, I'm a creative producer, and so it's been my job when I've produced my own material to make sure that the production that I have in my head gets assembled, that all the elements are necessary for that. So I even end up doing post-production supervision on my films, which allows me to make sure that right on through final cut and music and mixing, that all the pieces are what they should be.
Now, you've written and directed across a number of different genres. Are there any favorites?
The two most prominent films that I've done, both of which came out in recent years, are Notzilla, which is a spoof. And there's something in my DNA. It's just always been there to do that kind of, from even as a kid, as a kid, I loved satire. I loved spoofs. But I'm not the guy who's completely all comedy either. I've always had the desire not only to make people laugh, but to make them cry, to make them think. And the other film that's best known, most prominent out there that I've done is a pretty heavy drama, actually, an inspirational drama called Healing River. So I guess those would really be the two that most people think of. I've done other films, but those are the two that are most prominent and most out there.
And how about the religious aspect, Mitch?
I referred to Healing River as a quote inspirational film. There are people that would call it, understandably, a faith-based film. What sets it apart from most other faith-based films is it's edgy and realistic. It is not. There's a tendency. Faith-based movies have been growing and maturing as a genre of films, but they're still to some extent stuck in with the idea that their main purpose is to be non-offensive and family friendly, something that the kids can watch with a mom and pop. And I don't mean to put that down at all, but this from the beginning, this was a story that could not be told that way. It had to be told in a more realistic and edgier way. It is still inspirational, but what it shows, what it depicts, it's a story of a woman whose only child, her 18-year-old son who just graduated from high school, was killed by a drug-addicted runaway teenager. And it's inspired by several true stories. And to depict that guy unrealistically, to depict what she goes through unrealistically, to make her just say, "Oh God, you know best. I miss my son," but it would be just anathema. She goes through the ringer. She hates God. She hates what God has allowed. Her faith crumbles. Her brother, who's a priest, goes through the ringer. The kid is not squeaky clean. He's not likable. We hate him. We only learn to gradually see him differently as she does. And one of the recurring comments, even from pastors about the film, is this is the first faith-based film I've ever seen that I believed. This took me there. It wasn't afraid to be dark. It took me where you had to go to tell this story. So in that sense, it is a faith-based film in the sense that right at the core of it is the whole concept of what it means to forgive, in the sense that Jesus tells his followers to forgive. Jesus put it right front and center. It's not a side issue in faith. It is a core central issue. And so the film deals with it in a gritty way, but it is very much what the film is about. It's about forgiveness and even moving beyond forgiveness to mercy and grace and going to the point of what Jesus said, love your enemies.
And how about the tutorial aspect, Mitch?
Tutorial? I like to let the story do the talking. So I'm not sure.
Are you trying to teach with these films that you're trying to pass on?
The film is very much about forgiveness and about going beyond forgiveness, but it's in the story. I like to let the story do the talking. So it's not, and that's another thing that sets the film apart from some of the more just for believers films. We've had a lot of non-believers who've really loved this film because it doesn't speak Christianese, it doesn't preach. It's a story, first and foremost.
Okay, very good, very good. Now, I've written and published 3 fiction novels. The last one is a crime drama that I believe is ripe for adaptation to a TV series. Have you ever done anything dealing with crime?
No, not really. I'm not against dealing with the crime as a subject matter. It's just a matter of the story. For me, it's all about story. That's if I read something, and it happens, I put together, generally speaking, the things that I've done have been my own material or adaptations. The first thing I ever produced was a modern day adaptation of the Rip Van Winkle story for Showtime called Out of Time. And it's a family friendly movie, comedy drama, really pretty heavy on the comedy part, actually. So there's an adaptation of in that case, a famous story, but for the most part, yeah, I do tend to do my own material. And I do have a couple of crime pieces in the works. And I'm not opposed to doing something else. It's just got to speak to me. It's got to be something that I feel an urge to do, and I see it in my head. I know the movie that 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 I want to make.
What are you working on right now?
I have a number of projects in the works right now. One is, in terms of comedy, it's a fantasy comedy. In terms of style, this is a bit of a throwback, but in terms of style, it's a bit like Bruce Almighty. It's called Barthland, and it's about a young man who's initially thinks he's been shot hunting by buckshot, but the doctor finds no sign of buckshot in him, and he eventually finds out his body has been invaded by an entire fleet of tiny spaceships. Uh, and they're a race of advanced beings who are basically the size of microbes, and they make him their new country. His last name is Barth, and he's Barthland. He wakes up to the sound of them singing their national anthem in the morning, and the story deals with that. It's a lot of fun. It was inspired by an old 1950s short story that I fleshed out and turned into a screenplay, and so I've been looking for financing for that. I also have a rom-com based on my own relationship with my wife, and I've got an epic post-apocalyptic piece that I'm working on too.
That's terrific. What do you consider your greatest accomplishments?
In life in general, or are we narrowing that a little bit?
Both in life in general and career-wise.
To say greatest accomplishments and then say parenthood and husbandhood may sound like I'm bragging about being a terrific husband and a wonderful father, and I certainly have lots of room for improvement in those areas. But being a person, being a person of some kind of integrity who strives to live what he believes is the most important thing to me. And therefore, while I've still got a long ways to go, there's a line in the movie Healing River when the priest, the kid that he visits in prison, the kid that killed his nephew because he's the brother of the woman, his son, who died, the kid flips out and starts throwing things at him and insists that drives him out of his cell. And the kid, she screams at him, Jesus! And the priest, trying to tone things down, but also honestly says, not really, but I'm trying. In a sense, that would be the core thing that I've strived to accomplish the most, being who I was. Not Plato, Socrates, I think, who had said the greatest thing you can accomplish in life is to be what you pretend to be.
And how about in your career? What are the greatest accomplishments in your career?
I'm very proud of those two films I mentioned. Notzilla was a hoot. Both were done on very modest budgets, and we were able to accomplish some really great things through sheer creativity. Sometimes having limitations can be a real key to finding a more creative way to do something. And so I think we made two wonderful little films there. They've both got real strong cult followings. Notzilla's got this kind of buzzy cult following going on. We also did a comic book of Notzilla, by the way, and I had a lot of fun with that. I have a novelization of Healing River coming out that I wrote. In fact, actually conceived it even before the screenplay, and I'm very excited about it. And so those are accomplishments I'm proud of. Career-wise, I don't know, I'm afraid I would ramble if I tried to think of other things.
I've often wondered, how do you gauge the accomplishments that those two movies have achieved as far as cult followings?
One of the things is you just pick up buzz. If I Google, which I do every now and then, Google Notzilla, every time I Google it, I'll see more fan art and buzz type stuff about the movie. And you know that it's had an impact on people. The latest viewer review on Amazon blew me away, and it was a very well written review too. It's on Amazon Prime, and the latest review there says this is the funniest movie ever made. It feels good.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. And with Healing River, there's a Healing River site on Facebook, and the stories of people who've talked about the impact of the film on them have been incredible, remarkable. You couldn't ask for more. People talk about the impact on the film that the film has had on them, the sense that they feel compelled to forgive someone they've never forgiven as a result of it, even someone who's literally several cases, someone whose child was killed by someone and they've never forgiven that person. It's just had that kind of impact. There are people calling it life-changing. That's what a storyteller, a real storyteller, wants to hear. I want to make people laugh, cry, think. I want to change people's lives. So when there are indications I've done those things, yeah, that's really satisfying. And there are some outlets here and there online where you find that out and you hear from people.
What do you consider your biggest career challenges?
For filmmakers, independent filmmakers, which everybody starts out as, nobody is a filmmaker working for studios making big budget pictures the day that they get their degree in filmmaking. For independent filmmakers, or if you're a screenwriter and you're just trying to get people to make it's just finding someone to do it, finding someone to finance it. Notzilla was set up and then fell apart several times. Healing River, under a different name, was originally slated to be produced as a movie of the week for Fox, the Fox channel, and then it fell through, and it was green lighted, but then the head of the network overrode the head of the movie division, and said, no, let's not do this one. I don't like this story. Which I found devastating at the time. But the truth is that they would have watered it down and it would have been a long forgotten movie of the week that I wouldn't have been allowed to direct, and it would have been the movie I wanted to make. Years later, when I played the lead role in a feature film for an independent producer here in the Midwest in Ohio, and he found out that I was also a filmmaker, and he said, pitch me what he got. And I sent him the storyline of Healing River, and he said, let's do it. I did it for a much smaller budget than the Fox production, but I got to make the movie I wanted to make, to tell the story I wanted to tell. It was a great experience, but it took years and years. Notzilla was set up to be done years ago as a modestly budgeted comedy from a boutique division of Warner Brothers. I had what they call a first look deal with Warner Brothers at the time, which meant that I was obligated to bring every project I had to them first, and then the arrangement was that I also could use the name. I was Mitch Teemley with Warner Brothers, which got me in the door, got movie stars attached to projects because I was with Warner Brothers. So that was the deal. But this boutique division, it was slated to do as their next film. And then they made an independent film right before it, the one that they were in production on, when they said, yeah, well, we're going to do this. And that film it bankrupted the division because the film went like 500% over budget, something insane like that. And I guess I can mention it. It was Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. It was initially intended to be like a $5 million movie, and it became like a $35 million movie with Johnny Depp attached to play the lead. And Johnny insisted that Terry Gilliam direct it. Terry Gilliam is a genius, but Terry Gilliam always spends way, way more money than he's been given. And the movie flopped initially. Now it's considered a cult classic, but it flopped, and it bankrupted that division of Warner, who was slated to do our. So you get there, and then something happens. That's happened to me too many times to count. Later, it was set up with a division of Miramax Dimension Pictures, who made all the Scary Movie films. And because they'd done so well with Scary Movie, they had the director of development who said, we've done really well with spoofs. Let's do this spoof. And then the very conservative people controlling the purse strings said, no, let's just make more Scary Movie franchises. So they stuck with the sequels on Scary Movie instead. You get set up, movie stars are attached, and then the deal falls apart. And then years and years later, you find someone who says, let's do this thing. So yeah, it's a long journey. It really is.
And where do you hope to be in the next 5 years, Mitch?
It's really hard to say. I've got film projects I'd love to do. My very core, I'm a writer, which is why I end up more typically than not directing something that I've written or developed. But so really, I'll be writing, and there are a lot of things that most professions people do, and then they retire. But writers don't retire. Writers basically write until they collapse at their desk. And in some ways, it seems I should be buried in my desk, really, with my computer in there with me. So just to continue writing, I have a dozen projects in development right now. I'm writing my memoirs. I've got a 3-part fantasy series called The Wishing Map that I'm working on, and I have a deal in the works on that. I've got both movie and fiction and nonfiction projects going, and that's where I want to see myself in the coming years, is rolling out these projects, that stories that I love, that I want other people to experience and love.
And how do you want to see yourself, or how do you like Mitch Teemley to be remembered?
I guess I'd like to be remembered as a guy who touched people, moved people, made people laugh, made people think, and who lived with integrity, who lived what he believed, practiced what he preached, who was the real deal. My mentor, I never met him, but via his works and reading about him, my mentor in life, probably more than anybody else, is C.S. Lewis. And that's C.S. Lewis's rep. C.S. Lewis was the real deal. He was a man who wrote with depth and humor and wisdom, but he also lived. He lived it. The people that spoke about Lewis, you may be familiar with the Inklings, the group he was a part of, which also involved J.R.R. Tolkien, his friends, his children. Well, he had adopted child, all basically say he was what he wrote about. That's what I really, that's what I want. I want to be real.
And can you tell us about your heritage and your family?
We talking ethnicity or just whatever pops into my head, or
Both what your roots are, ethnicity, and your family, speaking specifically about members of your family.
I'm ethnically speaking, I'm almost exclusively UK. My ethnicity is a blend of primarily English, Irish, Scottish, and Welsh, with a little bit of French thrown in there and a little bit of German thrown into the mix. My family, both sides of my family, trace back fairly far. There are some people that go way, way back to the 1600s, but not completely. They all came to it's everybody, it's so many American stories that people came to the East, of course, initially, and then worked their way west. I'm an only child, shooting fast forwarding, and that definitely colors who you are and what you do. I'm a boomer, and I came from parents who grew up. They were kids in the Depression, and so in a lot of ways, their focus on making ends meet, on providing materially, especially my father's emphasis on providing materially, allowed me to not think in materialistic terms at all. I didn't grow up wealthy, but I grew up comfortably middle class, went to college, first person that ever went to college in my family. And so, they laid the groundwork for me to be able to just pursue my dreams, what I want to do, instead of making ends meet. That wasn't such a big concern. In fact, I was practically unconcerned with that. I've always been just the guy who, as Joseph Campbell said, followed my bliss, the guy who just thought it'll work out if I just do what I'm wired for. And I did. I graduated in theater arts as an undergraduate, which that'll get you a job with any of the Fortune 500 companies. And later ended up realizing that wasn't doing much for me, except what it taught me. That it gave me a chance to do my thing and learn my craft. Then I went back to school and majored in directing, and at least with a graduate degree with the MFA, was able to teach in the lean times, and found that I really did teaching too. I don't know if that's exactly my background or how I was raised. I was raised by parents with integrity. But if you're wondering, because I mentioned doing a faith-based film and my personal faith, if you're wondering if I was raised that way, no, I was not. My earliest memory about where do we come from, Dad? My dad went and got a copy off the shelf of Origin of Species and said, here you go, son. No, I was actually all the way through my late teens. I was a quite outspoken atheist, and then reached a kind of a transitional point in my life where I began to doubt my doubts. I just didn't have enough faith to be a really devoted atheist, and ultimately, eventually, came to a very strong personal faith, and that's at the core of my life. But at the same time, I've never been really uncomfortable. I've never been comfortable with being the religious type. I don't think of myself. I don't like. My first prayer I ever prayed was something along the lines of, God, I'm yours. I want to follow you. Just don't make me a Christian. And I meant that because my idea of Christian was somebody with a hair helmet who preached on TV, somebody who was very judgmental. And I didn't want to be any of those things. I just wanted to, I wanted to follow Jesus, and not somebody who was a follower of a follower of a follower. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah.
How does your wife fit into all of this?
She's a lot like me in that regard. In other ways, we're opposites. She came from a very devout Christian home, and although she went quiet through her own little quiet rebellion uh, as a young adult, and said, "Okay, I need to know what I believe, not what my family believes. What do I believe? Where do I stand?" And that was something that we had in common. That our love of story. We both love Shakespeare. Our first date, we talked about Shakespeare for about 2 hours, and then she has a we're very different in a lot of ways. She's more conservative than me. She's a very private person. I'm a very public person. But we have this love of aesthetics that we share. We both have this incredible shared aesthetic. We love art museum. We love any kind of museum, any kind of artistic, creative experience. We've written a few things together, and she has incredible story sense. I run everything I write. If I'm editing a movie, I run the edits, each stage of the editing process of the film before her. And 9 times out of 10, when she says, this kind of sags here, this needs some work, I say, I don't agree. You're wrong on this one, honey. And about an hour later, I say, damn it, she's right. a lot of our relationship has been that in opposites attract, but also in some ways there's an expression, iron sharpening iron. We've made each other a little sharper in our differences.
And what do you most love about this person as a woman?
She's pretty hot, I got to tell you. No, what do I most love? She's the real deal too. She really is. She's someone who's still water runs deep. We used to sit in planning meetings, and the other people in the planning meeting, we'd sit around kicking around some concept and developing it, and almost everybody would say more than Trudy, my wife, would say, and then there'd be a lull after we'd been discussing something, and she would just say, I think, and she would toss something out, and there would be a quiet, and then everybody realized that was it. That was the thing we were trying to get to. I love that about her. I love that she's very insightful.
And how long have you been married, Mitch?
39 years.
Fantastic. Good for you. That's wonderful. What have I missed, Mitch? Anything that you'd like to mention or pitch?
Or pitch? Do we have executive producers sitting in on this?
Okay.
Oh, I don't know. Like I said, I've got multiple projects. When you are a freelance writer or you write spec scripts, screenplays that you write on spec, nobody says, hey, we want to make a movie, write the script. And then you're always developing multiple projects. I'm not sure how to answer that one, to tell you the truth, though. I don't think this is exactly a chance encounter in an elevator with a studio executive, is it? If it is, sure, I'll do my elevator pitch.
Oh, it is not. Be well, my friend.
Thank you. You too, Larry.
Thank you for the interesting conversation.
My pleasure.
My best to your family.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And you will be happy too.